They say the day of the Tokyo Marathon is the day we unite, where runners from all walks of life come together to push their limits. Today, I'm going to share what I learned after running the Tokyo Marathon. What worked, what didn't work, and the lessons I'll take forward. Let's get into it. First was increasing my mileage. I didn't realize just how beneficial increasing my mileage would be when it came to my Tokyo Marathon performance, but also general endurance. For comparison, in my previous 3 marathons, I only topped out at 83 kilometers for peak week. However, when I got to Tokyo Marathon training, I topped out at 105 kilometers in peak week. While this increase in mileage was uncharted territories for me, it was also about being strategic with my time in doing so, having to manage both full-time work but also all of life's responsibilities. And being honest here, looking at where I could increase my mileage was fairly easy. Bumping up my absorption runs on the Mondays from 7Ks usually up to 10Ks, but then a big changing factor for me was the introduction of a midweek long run. So I started off in the first few weeks hitting around 16 kilometers on the Wednesdays before work, all the way up to 22 kilometers in my peak period. So Wednesdays were a little bit of the mountain peak before then having to mentally and physically prepare for it all over with a long run on the Saturdays, getting up to 33 kilometers as my peak long run before getting into the Tokyo Marathon. For a detailed breakdown of the sessions I completed for the Tokyo Marathon, I'll leave a video card up here now for you to click on. I remember going to start my Tokyo Marathon training, running just 40 kilometers the week prior and then suddenly doing 72 kilometers in the first week. It was kind of mind-blowing to see that I was just 11 kilometers short of what used to be peak week in my previous 3 marathons as my first week of training. And as I continue on my running journey, I'm a firm believer that the training for a marathon is the marathon itself, having to complete 8 sessions each week for 12 weeks straight, then getting to the marathon, which seemingly went by so quickly. And after crossing the finishing line in Tokyo, it was the opportunity to reflect on all of those early mornings and even late nights where I just had to squeeze in more of my training sessions were all made worth it, shaving an additional 20 minutes off of my PB. Second, I've continued to learn how to manage both good pain but also bad pain during training. Now, if you've watched my videos previously, you'd know that I have had quite a difficult experience with shin splints ever since training for my first marathon, and they've still kind of lingered into my 4th marathon training. Though it was interesting, as I started to really bump up and increase my mileage, I actually noticed my shin splints started to go away. In a way, I felt like it was my body finally adapting to the training loads that I was putting it under, and due to asking my body to do an increased training load, it almost had to make those adaptations on the fly to ensure my shins were okay. Now, I'm not saying this is probably the solution for you if you do have shin splints, but for me personally, they have since gone away by just literally increasing my mileage. It's kind of crazy to think. And over the course of my training plan, found that my muscles weren't getting too tired to the point where I needed additional rest, and that was even including 2 strength sessions a week. Yes, my muscles were sore and I was quite tired in the mornings, but it was beneficial getting out there for a run because I actually felt so much lighter and better afterwards. Though as I got into peak week, I did start to experience some signs of plantar fasciitis. At first I thought, okay, I'll just monitor it and run with it, finding that it never really got to more of a pain scale of say 3 to 4 out of 10. But maybe in that final taper week period, realized it was starting to push up to a 6 to 7, so was quite mindful and dropped a couple of sessions to ensure I didn't inflame it anymore before race day itself. Luckily, getting into race day, taping my foot actually did help it, and found the pain only got to about a 2 in the final stages of the marathon there. So really starting to understand my body over the course of this running journey to distinguish what is a good pain that I can push through, but also when something is starting to feel a bit worse and bad pain that requires me to actually take a break or make a change to my training. My third lesson after Tokyo is my nutrition still needs to improve. During the marathon, I actually only took 4 of the 6 gels that I was carrying and none of the salt tablets that I had taped to some of my gels. While I did manage to take the Pocari electrolyte drink on the course as well as water, I did find that the lack of carbohydrates going into my system during the course is what probably caused me to hit the wall and not be able to push through at a faster pace in those final kilometers of the race. It was at the 33-kilometer mark where I really started to fade, finding my legs weren't able to kick into another gear and finding my final kilometer in the race wasn't actually as fast as I'd like. Thankfully, I finished the race a bit quicker before the heat started to affect me. It was a rather warm day compared to the historical temperatures that the Tokyo Marathon would usually be running. And I feel like training for multiple marathons now, we're always constantly experimenting to improve not only our times, but also our performance. So I'm really keen to work in the future to see how exactly I can nail this nutrition. I feel like I've got some good experience and ways of managing to carb load before the race. However, race day itself and during the race being able to take gels seems to be where I need to focus on. Perhaps it's actually carrying a water bottle or a flask in my hand that has carbohydrate drink mixes in it to get my fuel in and be able to settle into my stomach. If you've got any thoughts, leave them down in the comments below. The fourth lesson is that I've now developed quite a good running base. For my Tokyo Marathon, the training plan was only 13 weeks in comparison to a lot of my previous marathon training plans going 16 weeks and beyond to ensure I felt marathon ready. Obviously though, the 3 marathons that I've completed previously did help in actually establishing that base in the first place, but I did find getting into week 10 to 11 out of the Tokyo Marathon training felt like my body was in good shape and ready to go to run a marathon. So I believe going forward, if I'm trying to push a sub 3-hour marathon and Boston qualify, perhaps may need to bump it up to a kind of 20-week longer build. However, if I'm looking to just run a marathon just for the sake of fitness, for instance, probably would only need the 12 weeks to actually prepare for it. And again, I look back to when ramping up for my first week of the Tokyo Marathon training plan, suddenly going from 40 kilometers all the way up to 72 kilometers. It was quite an exciting sign to see that I can really ramp up week 1 of training for future marathons quite early on. The final thing that I've learned is I feel like a Boston qualifier time is actually achievable. Going into Tokyo, I didn't really think I could actually run 3 hours and 12 minutes, and I'll be completely honest. Obviously, I was running quite uncomfortably for a long distance, but I still feel like there's a bit more that I can give. And again, it's just down to that mental battle that I need to push a little bit further on to really see my times improve more from now on. While I'm still quite a while away from obviously running a Boston qualifier time, I do feel like I've made quite significant strides in my running journey, and I'm so thankful that I decided to stick with my marathon journey after running New York as well. I just wasn't happy with my first marathon time. I knew that I could do better. So in a way, I just really want to see how far I can actually go with this running. And for me, I feel like there are only 2 missing pieces to the puzzle that will allow me to run a Boston qualifier marathon time. The first, as I mentioned in this video here, is making sure I can nail my nutrition so it can support me through the entire marathon distance. Secondly, is also spending more time at marathon pace during my training. So I feel like in my 2 long runs for the week, I can start to include some marathon pace and also building more time spent at marathon pace in my tempo runs. For Tokyo, I only had my 2 quality sessions, one being the interval and one being a tempo run where I only got up to 30 minutes at marathon pace. I really feel like with the tempo runs in particular and the long runs for my next marathon training plan are really the key workouts that I need to include a lot more time spent at marathon pace to build up to almost 60 minutes in a way for tempos at the pace that I want to run a Boston qualifier at. Finally, it's also a reminder to myself that I've literally started from 0 long distance running experience, usually someone who would complete 200 meters as my key event in my teenage years, suddenly going all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum in training for marathon distances. I've got to remember I'm still very early on in this running journey, so with this rate of improvement and progression, understand that in this next phase that I'm entering to, it will be quite a challenge to actually see those more significant gains to my PB, but I'm also very committed and determined to see a time of sub 2:55 to Boston qualify in the future. So there we have it, friends. What I learned after running the Tokyo Marathon this year. I'm excited to see what happens next in this running journey. Still haven't quite worked out what marathon or what event I'll be running next, but I will be sure to keep you all posted with that update. I love making these kind of videos because it also makes me reflect on my journey so far into marathons and seeing just how much I've improved as a result too. I'm hoping you found this useful too on your own running journey, whether you're training for a marathon or some other distances out there. Leave a comment down below to let me know what you're currently training for. I'm Jack, and I'll see you next time. Catch ya.